she is. The Felis concolor, dominant feline species, native to North America.
It's the formula by which wildlife films have always been made. First, find an exotic or dangerous animal.
Commonly known as the mountain lion or cougar, its habitat is here in the remote wilderness of the Rocky Mountains.
Next, get as close as possible, close enough to share intimate details of the animal's life.
Uh-oh, this mother has lost track of her cubs. Now it's a game to stay away from her. And Mama isn't happy about it.
But as we're about to show you, on film, on television, in fact, in the very scene you're watching now,
few people get this close.
Not everything about animals in entertainment is as it appears.
Camera moved, but that's after the fact.
After the fact, here, let me just check it.
This is the dark side of natural history filmmaking.
You could lie in print, you can lie on film, you can lie in radio. The ability to tell untruths is huge, of course.
But for many animals in entertainment, it's also a matter of life or death.
It's a horrible life. It's a horrible life. And why they cling to life as they do, I don't know.
Hello, I'm Bob McEwen. Welcome to the Fifth Estate. A number of years ago, we broadcast a program called Cruel Camera, a landmark investigation of the treatment of animals in movies and on television. What we uncovered was surprising and far worse. Animals intentionally put in danger, abused, often killed. And in documentaries that claim to show what truly occurs in nature, we found manipulation, misrepresentation, and lies. A lot has happened since in the film and television industries. But when we take you behind the scenes again to investigate how animals in entertainment are treated today, you may be disturbed to learn how many of the most damning things we found 25 years ago haven't changed at all. It started with inventor Thomas Edison, who not only developed some of the earliest motion pictures, but who used them in 1903 to record what may well have been the first act of animal cruelty on screen, the electrocution of Topsy, the elephant. It was just the beginning. In 1925, as many as 100 horses were killed during the climactic chariot race in the original Ben-Hur. And the 1939 Western Jesse James became a milestone in American cinema for the wrong reason.
Now hold tight, Jesse, because there's only one way out of here.
It was an era when horses were expendable in Hollywood, and one was about to be expended. The stuntman who rode off this 70-foot cliff survived. The horse did not. Though with replacement horses, the final cut of the film made it seem the James gang and its trusty steeds all safely escaped.
Spirit, come here, come here. Good boy, good, stay.
Few have seen more of the history of animals in Hollywood, both good and bad, than Steve Martin. Not the actor, but the largest animal supplier in the entertainment industry.
You don't have to be worried about that.
Martin's been in the business for 40 years, training virtually every species for every job, including Bandit the raccoon and Chrissy the talking chimp.
You got a problem, sweetie?
Is it more regulated? Is there more scrutiny as to what's going on now?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, it's like just the handling end of it. Things are handled back then much more roughly. I mean, if you watch some of the old Tarzan shows, some of the stuff they did on those was pretty horrendous.
Like this scene from the original Tarzan, when a lion was stabbed to death.
Flipping over and quivering, it was horrible. Now, you couldn't get away with that now, and nobody in their right mind would even want to do that. Yeah. It's all right.
Today, at his ranch outside Los Angeles, Martin trains over 100 exotic animals.
They like to rub and you scratch them. Oh, does that feel good, huh?
He says the contrast with the lion in Tarzan shows how much has changed.
We've developed into a group of people that really do enjoy their creatures and spend a lot of time with them. Stay, stay.
As you'll see later, Steve Martin is a controversial figure.
Good, stay.
But it was back in the early 80s when we did our first cruel camera investigation. Days still considered the dark ages for animal abuse in Hollywood. Exhibit A then was the Western Heaven's Gate, a legendary box office flop. It would also be notorious for something else. At least 4 horses were killed during Heaven's Gate, including one dynamited to death. The producers claimed it was an accident. But watch this slow motion shot. The actor whose horse was dynamited from underneath him, highlighted here, was none other than Canadian rock legend Ronnie Hawkins.
Was it an accident?
Who knows? You know, I mean, I don't know who pushes the buttons, but I was blown up. I know that.
We led an outcry, boycotted the film, and many actors in the Screen Actors Guild joined with American Humane.
Karen Rosa is with the American Humane Association, which is separate from the Humane Society. Rosa says public outrage over Heaven's Gate led to dramatic improvement in animal welfare and entertainment.
In the past 25 years, we've come light years in our understanding of animal science, animal behavior, humane training techniques. I think that the bar has really been raised.
According to American Humane, in the past year alone, its monitors were on the sets of an estimated 1,000 productions. Rosa sees their role as creative collaborators, not the animal police.
So we're able to advise. Rather than just saying no, we're able to say, you can't do it that way. Here's how you might be able to do it.
If producers don't follow that advice and there's evidence of animal abuse, American Humane can withhold their signature seal of approval, the one that says no animals were harmed. Even worse, it can give a movie an unacceptable rating, which could hurt it at the box office. But the fact is that only happens to a tiny fraction of all the productions that are monitored. American Humane insists that's evidence their collaborative relationship with producers works, but not everyone is so sure.
Welcome to Wyoming.
Some in Hollywood believe American Humane and the industry are too close, and that the movie Flicka, produced in 2005 by 20th Century Fox, reveals the problem. Flicka is a remake of a 1940s family drama about a girl and her horse, featuring country music superstar Tim McGraw. The film's big scene comes at a rodeo, in a race where cowboys supposedly chase wild horses and try to mount them. In fact, the horses were tame, but the ensuing chaos was all too real.
Those horses on this particular set with Flicka were panicked and frightened and literally trying to run for what they instinctively feel is running for their life.
Roland Vincent is an experienced horseman who was an extra on the Flicka set. He had a prime seat in the rodeo grandstand when the horses began stampeding out of control.
The horses broke loose from their handlers, and then they started running in this herd mentality around the arena. And in doing so, the horses were crashing into each other, and one of them got kicked in the head and stepped on its lead and went down in an agonizing death. Laid there trembling and convulsing for a couple of minutes before it died.
20th Century Fox has not released the film of the death, but all the action involving horses had to be approved beforehand by animal monitors. American Humane's film and TV director Karen Rosa says every safety precaution was taken.
It did need to be staged, and there need to be protections in place. So there were 12 professional cowboys, and there were the domestic rodeo horses. There were pickup riders. We had 4 reps on set that day because it was a circular arena.
But if you've got even 4 domesticated horses, isn't there the obvious danger that one or more of them will race out of control, which is exactly what happened here?
That's why we had the pickup riders in the ring, and we thought that there was enough control in place. I think for those who are blanketly opposed to rodeo in all its forms and opposed to animals in entertainment, no protection, no guideline will ever be enough.
Afterwards, an American Humane investigation concluded it was all a tragic accident. That's not how extra and horseman Roland Vincent saw it.
They said it was an unpredictable accident, that it couldn't have been foreseen, that it couldn't have been prevented.
Well, it could be prevented by not doing it. And as for not being foreseen, it's like saying you don't believe there's going to be an automobile wreck in a demolition derby. I mean, what kind of lunatic doesn't see that kind of risk? Look what I got for you.
But of hundreds of cast and crew on the set of Flicka, only Roland Vincent, who's also an attorney, spoke out. He says 20th Century Fox offered him money not to talk, but he refused. In Hollywood, a place so dependent on show business, the use of animals in entertainment is a sensitive subject. Coincidentally, Los Angeles also happens to be the first city in the U.S. with a prosecutor who handles only animal protection cases. But when Bob Ferber began to investigate Flicka, he says American Humane refused to cooperate, citing confidentiality.
We in law enforcement hear about this movie and this scenario, and we want the evidence. AHA is, wait a minute, we have this relationship. If we turn the evidence over to you, it jeopardizes our relationship. We may not ever be allowed on a movie set again.
L.A. animal protection officials eventually ruled that though neglectful, the fatal rodeo scene was still in keeping with past movie industry practices. Prosecutor Ferber maintains the case should be a wake-up call for American Humane.
I think they're a valuable part of animal welfare, but when there's a clear case of neglect, and to me, allowing a horse running loose with a halter is absolute criminal neglect. The message was clear. We had gotten people scared about that. You need to be more careful about this, and we won't tolerate this a second time.
But despite all the controversy, American Humane did not give Flicka an unacceptable rating.
I think it kind of clarifies the role that AHA has in overseeing film. I mean, I think they are so much a part of the landscape that they identify with the production companies and not with the animals they're supposed to be protecting.
When we come back, what great wildlife documentary makers like Sir David Attenborough, Walt Disney, and Marlin Perkins all have in common.
Can I give you an example of what they have said to us?
No, I would like not to have this on the air, and I'd like to have you stop your camera right now, please.
For generations, much of what we believed about the natural world and the creatures in it was defined by one man. Almost single-handedly, Walt Disney created a market for wildlife films where none had existed before, with his so-called true life adventures. The titles are movie history: the Oscar-winning Living Desert, Perry the Squirrel, and another Academy Award winner, the classic White Wilderness.
There are many things about mountain climbing that these inexperienced youngsters have yet to learn.
An intimate portrait of life in the Arctic with memorable scenes like this one, starring an adventuresome young polar bear.
For when the long toboggan ride begins, there's no place to stop but the bottom.
But for Disney, even true life often required movie magic. These snowy slopes were essentially a giant film set, constructed specifically to shoot this sequence. As you watch, remember, this bear cub was placed at the top of the set, then intentionally sent careening downhill, picking up speed, so his fall could be captured by Disney cameras. But even that pales next to the lemmings.
Ahead lies the Arctic shore, and beyond, the sea. And still the little animals surge forward.
Another sequence from White Wilderness, supposedly filmed in the far north, it depicts the life cycle of the little rodents widely believed to periodically commit mass suicide.
They reach the final precipice. This is the last chance to turn back. Yet over they go, casting themselves bodily out into space.
But when we did our first Cruel Camera investigation, we found a few inconsistencies in Walt Disney's version of the life of the lemming. First, those lemmings weren't filmed in the Arctic at all, but 2,000 kilometers south, near Calgary. But lemmings don't actually live in southern Alberta, so Disney paid kids in Churchill, Manitoba to collect hundreds of them, which were then flown to Calgary. Most importantly, lemmings don't commit mass suicide. Experts tell us that's a myth. It doesn't happen, though it apparently didn't discourage Disney's producers. We learned that just off camera there was a turntable, flinging the lemmings out and over the cliff. To this day, the Oscar-winning White Wilderness is still distributed by Disney, now available on DVD. If there was an heir apparent to Walt Disney in nature filmmaking, it was the silver-haired Marlin Perkins, host of Wild Kingdom, the most successful wildlife TV show in history.
But we'll have to finish the job ourselves.
Each week, Perkins and his sidekick Jim Fowler had a variety of adventures, combining animals with confrontation.
Holding the net this way is going to be dangerous.
But as we discovered, there was more to it than that.
There he is.
Take this sequence filmed in the Florida Everglades. According to the script, Perkins and Fowler were there to rescue a wild bear that was lost. In fact, it was a tame bear that was brought to the swamp and chased by airboats and cameras. Then he was lassoed and wrestled into submission.
Jim and George get in.
In our original broadcast, we raised the subject with Marlin Perkins.
Under control.
Virtually everyone to whom we've spoken, from Roy Disney, who headed the Walt Disney Nature Film Productions for 20 years on down, say, look, fakery, even fraud, sometimes cruelty, are everywhere in this business, and they said even with Wild Kingdom. Can I give you an example of what they've said to us?
No, I would like not to have this on the air, and I'd like to have you stop your camera right now, please.
20 years after Marlin Perkins' death, Wild Kingdom is still on TV, on Animal Planet. In the 21st century digital universe, there are now more hours of nature and animal films available than ever before. The result is a burgeoning industry that helps filmmakers do what Walt Disney and Marlin Perkins did, with companies like Animals of Montana, which bills itself as a wildlife casting agency, whose talent roster includes everything from a grizzly bear to wolves and mountain lions, all trained, they promise, to perform to your script. You'll recall the scene we showed you at the beginning, the one with the mountain lion who'd lost her cubs, and the breathless narration.
There she is, the Felis Concolor.
I'm going to run toward you to try to get a look toward you.
Troy Hyde of Animals of Montana helped us cast and choreograph that.
Come on, Charlie. Come on. Anna, Lester.
At $7,500 a day, the snow leopard was out of the question. But we could afford the mountain lions.
There you go. Les, Annabelle. Here, Les.
The mother searching for her cubs is a seasoned pro named Charlie.
He's always going to run, right? He's not always. He's not going to prowl down. Like, I'd love to see him just kind of prowl down.
We could do that, I think. Charlie! Come on, Charlie!
Troy Hyde's animals are trained to perform a range of specialized behavior on command. Stalking, snarling, jumping.
You got that? Want a couple more?
But we're not the only ones to have this particular sequence orchestrated for them. Here's an identical shot from a film called Lion of the Americas, seen on Discovery. By the way, if you've noticed you haven't seen Mom and the cubs together in the same shot, you're right. That's because Charlie's not their mother at all, but a male mountain lion who might well do harm to the youngsters if he got too close. According to Animals of Montana, their customers include National Geographic, IMAX, even the gold standard for wildlife programming, the BBC Natural History Unit. Not on that list is the most respected name in all of wildlife film, Sir David Attenborough, who's produced and presented natural history documentaries for decades.
I've never in my life made a documentary in which we've gone to a tame animal or an animal trainer and say, please will you train an animal to do this? Yeah. Never.
But Sir David acknowledges the pressures on filmmakers to get the sensational shot.
You could lie in print, you can lie on film, you can lie in radio. The ability to tell untruths is huge, of course. But reputable natural history filmmakers do not lie. They tell the truth, but telling the truth is a simplification. It's often very difficult to tell the truth, but that's what we try to do.
But it's hardly difficult to find cases of the truth being stretched, or worse. Just a few of the examples we've uncovered. The striped hyena on a sunlit beach in the acclaimed British series Survival. In fact, hyenas are nocturnal and rarely go out in the sun. And in any event, this one was a captive animal, provided by a trainer. The cougar apparently attacking a man in an episode called Dangerous Encounters on PBS's Wild America. In reality, the cougar was tame, the man its owner. The bird with a broken wing, pursued by hungry crabs, then apparently devoured in the Oscar-nominated Winged Migration. But that ravenous mob isn't eating the bird at all. They're actually swarming over a dead fish.
This is one of the few places in the whole of the US where horses still roam wild.
And then there's British survival specialist Bear Grylls, whose show on Discovery is one of the most watched cable series in the US. Here he's supposedly trying to break a wild Mustang. In truth, the scene was choreographed. It's really a domesticated horse, which came by trailer from a nearby ranch. Watch this. When you freeze the tape, you can see its horseshoe reflecting the sun.
This is the dark side of natural history filmmaking, of wildlife documentaries. We don't know how prevalent it is. No one is out there. When you're in the wild, no one knows. Okay, everybody, can I have your attention, please?
Producer Chris Palmer founded the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University. He's also an outspoken critic of sensationalism in wildlife film.
The competitive pressures for ratings are so intense that people who make wildlife documentaries, like me, are under intense pressure to produce highly entertaining films. That means films with drama, films with conflict, films with aggression. And sometimes it means films with sex, films with predation. And how do you get that? How do you achieve that?
So as a producer of wildlife films, how do you feel that pressure? And how do you respond to it?
You feel the pressure because you won't get a job. You won't earn money to pay the mortgage and pay for your kids to go to college unless you produce a film that has high ratings. How do you get high ratings? That means it's got to have lots of money shots, lots of drama. And unless you have that, you are not going to get asked to make another film.
Palmer knows what he's talking about. One of his productions is the IMAX film Wolves, rich in close-up footage of a wolf pack. Incredible access to such an elusive species. But there's a reason for that. Now, I'm going to ask you about the film you made for IMAX, Wolves. Because in the tail credits of that, you credit a company called Animals of Montana. Mm-hmm. Who are they?
It's a company that has captive animals, which they rent out. And we rented wolves from them to be in our wolves film.
So that wouldn't fall into the category you've just described?
Yes, it does. Now looking back on it, what we did was we used captive wolves in the film, and the audience was misled because they assumed, they assumed that they were wild wolves.
With infinite patience, the yearlings supervise the pups in turns.
Chris Palmer argues it's simply not possible to get such intimate access to wolves in the wild.
They are already playing.
And I think the mistake we made, if we made a mistake, was that we didn't tell the audience. The film reflected real wolf behavior. Everything was natural and authentic and scientific, but the fact was those wolves were captive, they weren't wild.
when it's cooler...
Which brings us to this, Arctic Warrior, a David Attenborough film about polar bears, which is set in the Arctic. Or so it appears.
The key to polar bear biology, of understanding what rules a polar bear's life, is that during the winter, the female goes into a den, and it's there that her cub is born. So it's a fascinating and important element in the life history. Her cub is born helpless and blind.
It's the kind of extraordinary scene that would seem almost impossible to capture anywhere but a zoo, which it turns out is exactly where this was shot.
The cub stays warm, despite the appalling conditions of winter outside, where temperatures drop to below -50 degrees. Now, if you tried to do that in the wild, you would almost certainly risk the life of the baby and probably the cameraman too. So if you want to show that, and you can take it in a zoo where they are breeding polar bears, and you don't pretend that it's anything other than a survey of polar bear life history, then that's acceptable.
What troubles some is that there's no mention of a zoo on screen or in narration.
And we didn't make any secret of it. I mean, we gave credit to Frankfurt Zoo where it was shot.
But not in context, not at the time.
Not in the film, no. Because you're not talking about how we made this film. You're talking about the biology of polar bears. And tucked into its mother's thick fur.
But listen again to Sir David's script.
Despite the appalling conditions of winter outside, where temperatures drop to below -50 degrees.
It does seem to imply the birth is taking place in the Arctic, not a zoo. And do you believe that the viewers would have understood that that was a possibility at the time, or does it even matter?
I don't think it's of any consequence. I suppose the inclusion of that, I still think it's justified, but that's about the closest that I've been worried about.
So no hard feelings?
When we return, what happens to many animal actors after the lights and the cameras are off?
I got him. I got him. All right, 310. He's down.
They're our closest relatives in the animal kingdom. They share almost the same genetic structure. They have strong family ties. And like humans, they communicate.
They are so like us. People are amazed. You know, they watch chimpanzees kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another on the back. They see them using and making tools so cleverly to get food. And I think above all, they're fascinated by the long childhood, the importance of learning during that long childhood.
No one knows that better than Jane Goodall. In fact, she discovered much of it during 4 decades of groundbreaking research in Africa. Now, Jane Goodall is on the front lines of the battle over the use and abuse of animals in entertainment. She wants to put a stop to this. Chimps trained to work in movies, on television, and in commercials. What most of us don't understand, she says, is that with life expectancy not much less than ours, the lovable chimps we see on screen are really babies, separated from their mothers in the name of show business.
When you've spent all the years I've spent looking at the long-term bond between mother and child, the very fact of taking the child away at usually 1.5, 2, something like that, I mean, it's really cruel.
According to Jane Goodall, even performances that appear harmless require training that's anything but.
The impact would be about the same as for abused children, so that some will emerge really scarred for life and appearing so. But, you know, even if it's done really nicely, they are still ripped from their mothers. They still have their future destroyed.
How many primates do you have?
6 orangs and 9 chimps. This is Harry. Just so you know, he'll spit on you.
Yeah.
If he doesn't know you.
Remember Steve Martin, Hollywood's biggest animal supplier? As one of the few remaining chimpanzee trainers, he's on the other side of the fight over entertainment chimps.
Jane Goodall said to us that even under the best of circumstances, that just the fact that you have taken what is essentially an infant, a baby, away from its mother is abuse of a kind. How would you respond to that?
Well, for one thing, we don't take them away until they're over a year old. And you become...
But they're still babies.
They're babies, sure, they're babies. But you become the mother. And then they're with us all the time. And they're attached to us just like mom. Bongo.
And Martin says, like kids, chimpanzees often need tough love.
It's all right. It's just like with children. Some people believe in never having any discipline. And then some parents might think a swift smack on the butt might do this kid some good. So, I mean, who's to say who's right?
Hold it up. Hold it.
But look at the relationship between this trainer, Josh Weinstein, and his chimp named Tarzan.
Okay, cut it for a second.
Hold it. Hold it here. Stay.
It's tough to watch, especially because Weinstein knows he's on camera.
That level of control that's needed to be able to safely take them onto sets and into the public, you just can't create that control without abusing them.
Sarah Beckler is a law student specializing in animal rights. Her undercover study of chimpanzee training would become a milestone in the field. When Beckler volunteered with Hollywood trainer Sid Yost, who once worked with Wild Kingdom, she saw firsthand the methods used with entertainment chimps.
They punch them, they kick them, they use weapons such as a sawed-off broom handle that they called the ugly stick. They use them to threaten the chimps, but also to strike them. They throw rocks and locks and other hard things at these. These are baby chimpanzees that they're doing.
She says violence was not only for discipline, but fear.
There's also just an element of out of the blue, no apparent reason, punching or kicking, just to keep their attention, keep the chimps' attention on the trainers.
Sarah Beckler's study concluded that for chimpanzees in entertainment, physical abuse is simply inevitable. But there's something else most people don't know. That when they're still only adolescents, chimps are usually already impossible to control for almost anything requiring proximity to people. By the age of 7 or 8, once cute little chimpanzees can weigh well over 200 pounds, several times stronger than a human, sometimes violent, with half a century or more left to live.
It's all right. Come here.
And does that concern you as to what their future is when they're 7 or 8 years old and they've got decades left?
To a certain point, yes. I mean, but any places I've placed them have been places that I felt were good social places for them to socialize with other chimps.
But when we asked Steve Martin about one of his former chimps named Kirby, he was a bit vague about where he's living now.
Kirby actually is in Texas at the Amarillo. No, not the Amarillo. There's a guy, Wally, that runs it, and I can't think of the name right offhand.
In fact, we tracked Kirby down at a roadside zoo called Wild Wilderness Safari. Not in Texas, but in Arkansas. His home is behind these iron bars, with one other chimp. They spend their days begging for food. At 15, Kirby can expect to live like this for another 40 or 50 years. But his situation is still better than that of some chimpanzee actors retired by their trainers. Chubbs was in the remake of Planet of the Apes. Then he was sent to a so-called refuge in Texas. In 2004, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals released this videotape showing dismal living conditions there. Chimps fed dog food and rotten produce.
What kind of life is that for
It's better actually to be euthanized. It's a horrible life. It's a horrible life. And why they cling to life as they do, I don't know. Gorillas tend to die, but chimpanzees just have this. Same as us. I mean, people are like that. Think how people survived concentration camps.
But some chimpanzees don't survive.
No, okay. So,
This chimp, named Tyler, starred in Race to Space with actor James Woods. Another chimp, Ripley, appeared on Seinfeld.
So no hard feelings?
When Ripley and Tyler reached the age when they were too difficult to control, they were shipped to a roadside zoo in Nebraska, one previously cited a dozen times for keeping animals in unhealthy conditions. This is Tyler.
Want a groom? Rippy.
But when a keeper left one of the cages unlocked, Ripley and Tyler were among 4 chimpanzees that escaped. The Fifth Estate obtained this police video showing the chimps hunted down by zoo personnel in a golf cart.
I got him. I got him. I got him.
Tyler and 2 others were shot to death.
He's down.
But there was a time for chimpanzees when this desert compound in New Mexico was as bad as it got. A research facility where older chimps were sent to be used in biomedical experiments. When the lab closed in 2002, primatologist Carol Noon raised millions of dollars to buy the property and the chimpanzees in it.
So you would be sent in here for the research protocols.
Yikes.
If you were lucky, you'd have someone over there.
Cellmates.
And you wouldn't even treat a serial killer that way.
The chimps here often were left in isolation, sometimes for years.
It was terribly dismal and depressing and horrible. It was the bottom of the barrel for these chimps.
But today, the New Mexico compound has a new lease on life as a kind of halfway house for 157 chimpanzees that survived scientific experiments or show business. 2 of them once belonged to Steve Martin in Hollywood, Freddie, and his pal Chrissy, one of the talking chimps from Babe, Pig in the City.
You know, that stuff about no yesterday and no tomorrow.
All you got is this actual now and this...
Eventually, all the remaining chimpanzees here will leave for Carol Noon's new Florida sanctuary.
Well, we've moved almost half to Florida already.
Wow.
So we should be done by the end of 2009. This place should be empty.
But the reality is that of the 2,000 or so captive chimpanzees in the U.S. and Canada, there's room only for a few hundred of them at sanctuaries like the Center for Great Apes, also in Florida, run by another chimp protector, Patty Reagan. She saved dozens of primates, including 29 chimps.
Of the 29 total, we probably have 20 that were in show business, and the rest were pets or small ex-circus chimps.
A case in point, one of the best-known chimpanzees of all, Michael Jackson's pet chimp Bubbles. He was the pop star's constant companion, but when he also became too big and too strong, Bubbles was banished from Neverland and disappeared. Jane Goodall told us where to find him.
Patty Reagan has the original Bubbles. You know, there were all these rumors that Bubbles was stuffed, Bubbles was dead. He's so beautiful. He's a very, very beautiful chimp, Bubbles.
Goodall believes Jackson's trainers used some harsh methods with Bubbles.
Well, I know that he was hit because that was what Michael Jackson told me. Punched and flew across the floor. So, and that was from Michael Jackson. Not by Michael, by the way. I don't think he would do that.
But even for the fortunate few that end up here or places like it, it's people like Patty Reagan who have to raise the estimated $14,000 per year that it costs to support each entertainment chimp, possibly for decades.
Once they're out of that situation, it's a lifetime responsibility for a sanctuary to take care of them.
He's got a mouthful of water right now.
So financially, trainers like Steve Martin really only have 2 options. Find someone willing to take his older chimps and to pay for their upkeep, or support them himself.
Is that why you have thought about selling yours?
Well, who said I was trying to sell them?
In fact, this letter from his lawyer did, sent on Martin's behalf to a select group of sanctuaries, stating that he'd entertain a serious offer to sell all his great apes. Otherwise, it said, he would commence breeding to exploit the new business opportunities. In other words, produce even more captive chimps.
Don't quit. Well, if somebody wants to pay me enough money and buy me out, fine. How about, wouldn't you go for the same thing? When you know the inevitability of working chimps is very short. I figure in the entertainment industry, you're lucky if you have another 5 or 10 years at the most.
Just because the writing's on the wall now, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's the way I feel about it.
That can't come soon enough for the chimpanzee's champion, Jane Goodall. She now travels about 300 days a year, spreading the word that people must respect all living things, especially those so much like us.
Hello. I would say it's the public education that's absolutely key in all of this. You know, people don't go to circuses with chimps, they stop using chimps. If people won't watch movies with live chimps in them, then the movies won't be made. What would be the point?
As for the chimps already raised by humans, their best hope may be here. Carol Noon's new Save the Chimp sanctuary, built outdoors, surrounded by water, not iron bars. A place where chimps can be chimps again, even after lives sacrificed for the sake of entertainment.
It's a trivial use of an endangered species for the whole purpose of making people laugh a little harder. I just don't think that's a noble enough use. And everything about the system is wrong, from taking the babies from their mothers to having them end up wherever they end up. Usually they don't end up here.
Indeed, the vast majority still will spend the rest of their lives somewhere more like this. You can see this report and watch our original Cruel Camera broadcast in its entirety on our website. They're easy to find at cbc.ca/fifth. And for more on what's coming up on our program, stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Fifth Estate crews are always on the road, getting new programs ready for broadcast. Here's a look at a story that I'll have for you soon. They were a band of brothers in the traveling circus called Stampede Wrestling.
They remind me of a Viking ship, a lot of tough, bearded Goliaths that you wouldn't want to mess with.
All schooled by Calgary's legendary Stu Hart in the fine art of doling out and receiving pain.
It might have been close to a religious experience for him.
The graduates of Stampede Wrestling went on to become some of the biggest names in the wrestling world, until one by one they began to disappear.
Police say Benoit murdered his wife.
Sometimes they took with them those they loved the most.
When I heard about Chris doing that to his wife and child, it just sent me back there. You know, I was in that spot once.
What's killing Canada's great wrestlers? Coming soon on the Fifth Estate. And that's our program for tonight. I'm Bob McEwen. For everyone here at the Fifth Estate, thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.